She wasn't supposed to touch the laptop. She was supposed to scrub the floors, wash the glass, and vanish before anyone noticed she existed. But one night, tired, barefoot, and burning with quiet ambition, a maid opened her billionaire boss's computer. She wasn't stealing. She was building. And when the CEO caught her in the act, he did what men like him always do. He got angry. Until he saw what she had created. Until he realized she wasn't just cleaning his house. She was about to change the world. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The mansion at Silverwood Estates stood like a monument to silence and success, its white marble exterior gleaming under the silver kiss of the moonlight. Inside, the world was quiet, too quiet for a house so large. Crystal chandeliers hung over empty hallways. Mahogany walls echoed only the soft ticks of antique clocks and the occasional creak of settling wood. Mabel Silver moved quietly through the grand kitchen, her slippers barely making a sound on the cool tiled floor. It was nearly midnight. Her shift had ended hours ago, but she hadn't gone to bed. Her hands, calloused from years of cleaning, still trembled slightly. Not from exhaustion, but anticipation. She reached the heavy oak door of the study. Her heart thumped against her ribs like a drum. Slowly, carefully, she pushed it open. The scent of leather and old books greeted her, mixed faintly with the sterile smell of electronics. The dim glow of the desk lamp lit up the room just enough. She approached the large mahogany desk and opened the laptop. It powered on with a faint hum. The screen glowed, and Mabel's face was illuminated, not just by the light, but by something deeper. Hunger, hope, determination. She logged in. She had memorized the guest profile weeks ago. It wasn't hacking, it was survival. No personal files, no corporate secrets. Just her own little island of learning. A hidden folder titled Code Dreams, tucked inside the documents directory. Here lived her world. Bits of JavaScript exercises, free HTML tutorials, a beginner's React app, and tonight's task. Wireframing a full-stack education platform she'd been imagining for months. She opened a blank screen and began to type. The soft clack of keys filled the room like a symphony to her soul. The lines of code flowed from her fingers not like commands, but like poetry. Her dream was clear. Build an app so intuitive, so simple, that even children in the most remote villages could learn arithmetic and basic literacy with nothing more than a tablet and minimal internet. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Inside, her heart beat faster as she adjusted margins, styled buttons, and plotted data flow diagrams in a notebook she'd bought from a dollar store. A sticky note above her keyboard read, "Even broken wings can learn to fly." Suddenly, the quiet was broken by the soft click of the front door. Her blood ran cold. Footsteps. They were deliberate. Heavy. Getting closer. She scrambled to close her tabs, but her fingers shook. One wireframe remained stubbornly open on the screen, a learning dashboard designed for low-bandwidth environments. It still displayed the motto she'd typed in the footer. Learn anywhere. Learn always. The study door burst open. Standing there in a tailored navy suit, jet-lagged and visibly shocked, was Mr. Richard Hartz, billionaire, tech mogul, and the man whose computer she had just been caught using. His face froze. Her heart stopped. He stepped forward slowly, his voice low but sharp. "Mabel, what the hell are you doing?" She couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her breath caught like a snagged thread. He looked past her to the screen. "You've been using my laptop? My office?" I was just," she stammered. "I didn't mean. I only used the guest login. I never touched your files. I swear." He raised a hand. "You broke my trust. You broke into my study." "I didn't break anything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I only wanted to learn." Richard's expression turned darker. "Get out. Now. You're fired." Tears welled in Mabel's eyes. She quickly gathered her small notebook, unplugged her flash drive, and stepped away from the desk. Her palms were wet. Her body trembled. The weight of dreams unraveling crushed her lungs. She didn't plead, didn't beg. She nodded once and left, holding her notebook like a lifeline. Richard stood there in the dim light, fuming. He sat down at the desk, his finger moving to shut the laptop. But his eyes paused, catching the still open screen. And then everything changed. The room was silent again, but now it breathed with tension. Richard Hart sat behind the desk, his jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, still half-shrouded in the soft amber glow of the desk lamp. The only sound was the low whir of the laptop fan and the dull echo of his own heartbeat, unusually loud in the cavernous stillness of the room. His hand hovered over the trackpad, intent on shutting it all down, closing the window, deleting the folder, erasing the audacity of what had just happened. But something made him pause. His eyes flicked to the screen. There, open in a browser window, was a sleek user interface mock-up. Not flashy, not complex, but clean, structured, thoughtful, the kind of design that took patience and instinct. He leaned closer. At the top of the screen was the title, Pathway, Education Without Borders. Beneath it, soft blue buttons, simple menus, icons with hand-drawn charm. And at the bottom of the page, in small gray font, a credit line. Concept and design by M. Silver. Richard sat back slowly. M. Silver. He clicked into a folder labeled dev_notes. Inside were handwritten planning docs saved as photos, scrawled wireframe sketches, rough code snippets, CSS files, UX feedback notes. She had even left small sticky note icons labeled with dates, as if leaving signposts to herself. Try Bootstrap Grid here. Optimize image sizes. Fix NAV bar bug. He opened a file named mission_statement.txt and began to read. This app is for the kids like my brother Daniel, who had to leave school at 9 to work. For the girls in my village who were told computers are for boys. For the ones who still believe learning can lift you, even when the world tells you it won't. Richard sat there, eyes fixed on the screen. The anger in his chest didn't vanish, but it shifted. It twisted into something else. Confusion. Curiosity. A slight sting of guilt. He wasn't easily impressed. His company handled multi-million-dollar development contracts. He led teams of the brightest minds from MIT and Stanford. But this wasn't just clever design. This was conviction. He leaned back, rubbed his chin, and for a moment smiled. A flicker of something old, maybe respect, lit his face. But just as quickly it disappeared. He closed the laptop, pushed back the chair, stood. Downstairs, Mabel sat in the tiny utility room where she kept her few belongings in a modest canvas bag. Her hands shook as she folded her cleaning apron, pressing the fabric over and over, as if the ritual could steady her mind. Tears stained her cheeks, but she didn't sob. She was used to loss, used to being told she wasn't enough. The first time she was told, "You can't," was at 7, when she tried to join the only internet cafe in her town and was laughed out of the room. The second was when she was denied a scholarship because she didn't fit the profile. And now, caught, fired, dreams crushed. She picked up her notebook, the one she carried everywhere, and held it tightly to her chest. Inside were pieces of her soul, code written during stolen moments, sketches done in the pantry at midnight, logic diagrams mapped out between cleaning shifts. All that effort, all those years, gone in an instant. The house was still. No one had come after her. No one would. Why would they? She stood, slipped on her jacket, sat on the edge of the cot, waiting for the cab she had already texted for using the mansion's weak Wi-Fi. It would arrive in 10 minutes. And then back to nothing. No laptop. No workspace. Just survival. But upstairs, Richard remained standing in the study, motionless. His mind was racing, and something inside him, something he hadn't felt in years, was waking up. He stepped toward the door, paused, then walked down the grand staircase, each step echoing like a countdown. When he reached the hall outside the servants' wing, he hesitated. He could hear the faint sound of shuffling, a suitcase handle being pulled. He cleared his throat softly. The door creaked open. Mabel turned, startled, eyes red but dry. Richard stepped into the doorway, arms crossed. He didn't yell. Instead, his voice was quiet, almost careful. "Mabel," he said, "come back inside." The moment stretched like pulled wire between them. Mabel stood in the doorway of her small room, suitcase handle in hand, frozen in place. She blinked up at Richard, eyes clouded with disbelief. The same man who'd dismissed her hours earlier was now blocking the exit, not with power, but with something else. Something unfamiliar in his gaze. "Come back inside," he said again. Softer this time. She didn't move, didn't speak. "I saw what you were building," he added, his arms loosening at his sides. "The app. The interface. The mission statement." He hesitated. That wasn't just curiosity. That was purpose. Mabel swallowed, her voice hoarse. "I shouldn't have touched your computer." "No," Richard said. "You shouldn't have." Then after a beat. "But I also shouldn't have judged you before I knew what you were doing." Her fingers clenched tighter around the notebook in her hand. "You designed that entire system?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes. I'm still working on it. I've been learning as I go. Mostly from free tutorials and open source projects. I don't have a real degree. I just tried to figure it out." Richard stepped aside, gesturing gently. "Come to the kitchen. Talk to me." She hesitated, then followed. The marble halls felt colder than usual, the lights low, the silence between them stretching like thin glass. In the kitchen, Richard poured 2 cups of coffee, awkwardly, as if unfamiliar with the act. It struck Mabel for the first time how unused to small things he was. She who lived in small things saw it immediately. They sat across from each other at the Long Island counter, a table meant for brunches and business deals, now cradling 2 steaming mugs and the quiet hum of possibility. Richard broke the silence first. "You didn't just code a few features. You planned a full system. You had UX flow, wireframes, logic trees, database schemas." It was impressive. Mabel stared into her cup. "It's not polished. It doesn't have to be. It has soul." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about it. The whole thing. From the beginning." She looked up, surprised. Then slowly, unsurely, she began. "My village has 1 school. No computers. 1 teacher for 50 kids. We didn't have Wi-Fi until 3 years ago. And even then, it was barely enough to check email, let alone learn anything. But I knew people were learning to code on the internet. I just had to figure out how." Richard watched her closely as she spoke, absorbing every word. "I used to take notes at night when I borrowed broken phones from neighbors. Then, when I came here, I saw this whole house full of tech and books. Things I never dreamed I'd touch. I didn't want to steal. I needed to try. To build something that could teach kids who were like me without needing a fancy laptop or fast internet." She opened her notebook, flipping through pages of hand-drawn diagrams and annotations. Pathway was supposed to be a stepping stone, lightweight, multilingual, offline mode enabled. Just enough to teach basic literacy, numeracy, maybe even beginner coding. Richard ran a hand over his mouth, stunned by how clear her vision was. Not corporate, not monetized, just human. He glanced at her again, this time differently. Not as the maid who had broken a rule, but as a mind that had broken through a barrier. "I have a team of engineers," he said finally, "and none of them think like you." Mabel lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. "I shouldn't have fired you," he continued. "But I also can't just go back to pretending I didn't see what you're capable of. That would be a bigger mistake." She blinked, her throat tight. "So here's what I'm proposing," he said. "You stay, not just as a maid. You take evenings off. We clean up your code, give you access to real tools. I'll get you a proper laptop, mentor you. See what this thing can really become." Mabel's eyes widened. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the counter. "You'd help me?" "I won't do it for you," he said, voice firm. "But I will help you do it your way. If you're serious." "I'm always serious," she whispered. Good, he said, standing. Because the world doesn't need more coders. It needs more builders with heart. She rose, still stunned, her body suspended somewhere between shock and disbelief. As he walked her back to the servants' hallway, she looked up at the towering ceilings and thought, maybe this wasn't a mansion she just cleaned. Maybe this was the beginning of something. The following Monday, the rhythm of the Hart's estate subtly shifted. It was no longer just a place of polished marble, ambient silence, and the clink of silver trays. There was something new in the air, something invisible, yet charged. A sense of something unfolding beneath the surface, just out of view. Mabel stood at the threshold of the study once again, but this time, she didn't have to sneak. The door was open, the light was on, and the guest's laptop was gone. In its place, on the far end of the wide desk, sat a sleek, matte gray machine. A sticky note was taped just below the screen in neat, architect-like handwriting. Use this instead. I expect great things. R. She smiled softly, tracing the edge of the note with her fingertip like it might vanish if she pressed too hard. She opened the laptop, and the screen lit up with a welcome message already configured with her name. Welcome, Mabel. The desktop background was plain, professional, and empty, except for one folder labeled Pathway Dev Environment. Inside were pre-installed tools, Visual Studio Code, Figma, Git, Node.js, and sample APIs. The signal was clear. Richard hadn't just given her permission. He had given her a toolkit. That night she worked, not out of fear, but with fire. Every line of code she typed felt cleaner, faster, more purposeful. She stayed up until nearly 3 a.m., designing the adaptive quiz module. She wanted the app to respond to the user, not just feed questions, but listen to mistakes, learn from patterns, then adjust. Downstairs, the rest of the house slept, but Mabel's screen glowed like a lantern guiding her through the future. Meanwhile, Richard found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, watching someone learn. He'd created a private Slack channel for Mabel and added her to his software firm's internal sandbox under the name Consultant MS, a shadow contributor meant to observe and test ideas in real time. She wasn't introduced formally to the team. Not yet, but her name started to appear in Git commits. Quietly, consistently. Within 2 weeks, whispers began. Who's MS? Who coded this clean onboarding page? Did someone just redesign the dashboard flow? His senior engineer, Val, knocked on his office door one morning, holding a printout of a Figma prototype. Whoever this is, she said, they understand user empathy better than half our design team. Richard smirked but said nothing. Later that day, he watched from a distance as Mabel worked in the study. She had headphones in, head tilted slightly, her brow furrowed as she debugged a learning module. A pile of books sat beside her. Designing for Digital Inclusion, The Pragmatic Programmer, and a notebook filled with handwritten reminders in both English and Spanish. She was no longer the silent girl pushing a mop down the hallway. She was a builder, a dreamer, a mind on fire. But trust, Richard knew, wasn't built on talent alone. It required structure, boundaries, mutual understanding. So he gave her more than tools, he gave her time. Evenings were hers. From 6 p.m. onward, she was off duty. No chores, no cleaning, just code. The rest of the staff, puzzled at first, began to adjust. Some admired her. Others gossiped. But Mabel remained steady, focused. She didn't crave attention, only progress. One afternoon, Richard surprised her by knocking on the study door. She looked up, startled. Sir? I thought you might want some feedback on the new dashboard animation, he said, holding a tablet. He sat beside her as she walked him through the module. She explained the UX choices. Large buttons for younger children, limited color palette for visual clarity, offline first caching. You designed all this from scratch? He asked, not skeptically, but with genuine intrigue. Mabel nodded. I had to. I couldn't afford to rely on someone else's code. I needed to understand every piece. He paused, nodding slowly. That's rare. She blinked. What is? That kind of ownership. On the third week, something extraordinary happened. Mabel pushed a beta version of Pathway Lite into the test environment, a stripped-down, mobile-friendly app that functioned with less than 512 megabytes of RAM and ran without internet after initial setup. It included voice guidance, local storage quizzes, and a feature that let teachers send lessons through QR codes. Richard forwarded the link to his R&D division with one line. "This came from someone you've never heard of. Look closely." Within hours, he got the reply. "We need to talk about this build. There's something here." And he knew this wasn't a side project anymore. This was something real. That night, as Mabel stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the garden, laptop in hand, she saw the city lights blinking beyond the horizon. Her fingers rested gently on the keyboard, but her eyes were distant, imagining villages, children, and classrooms that didn't yet exist. She whispered to herself, "One day they'll log in, and their lives will change." Behind her, in the shadows, Richard watched, not to monitor her, not to supervise, but to remember what it looked like when someone believed. The air inside the Hearts Innovations headquarters buzzed like a live wire. It was the day of the annual Innovation Summit, the crown jewel in the company's calendar. Once a year, investors, board members, top clients, and select media gathered in the glass-walled atrium of the downtown high-rise to see what the future looked like, as envisioned by Richard Hartz and his elite team. Banners hung from the upper balconies in sharp serif fonts. "Inventing tomorrow today." The room pulsed with ambition. The usual format was predictable: polished product rollouts, quarterly projections, slick demos on wall-sized displays. The crowd expected suits, buzzwords, and champagne. What they weren't expecting was Mabel. In a back room 2 floors above the lobby, Mabel stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of a crisp white blouse. Her hands trembled slightly. It was the first time she'd worn anything so formal. Not a uniform, not a maid's apron. Just her. Val, the senior engineer who had quietly become her biggest supporter on the dev team, walked in holding a tablet and a thumb drive. "You ready?" she asked. Mabel exhaled slowly. "No, but I'm going anyway." Val smiled. "That's how you know it matters." Downstairs, Richard took the stage. He wore his trademark charcoal suit, no tie, collar slightly open, relaxed but sharp. The crowd settled. He began with a short preamble, a few nods to revenue growth, emerging markets, and tech scalability. The usual. But then his tone shifted. "This year, we're not just unveiling products. We're unveiling people." A murmur rippled through the audience. He continued, "There's someone I want you to meet. Someone who, not long ago, was completely invisible to this industry. Someone who taught herself to code, design, and build, not in a classroom, not in a corporate lab, but between work shifts at midnight, with nothing but grit." He turned slightly, gesturing toward the stage entrance. "Her name is Mabel Silver. She's here to introduce Pathway, an app designed to bring foundational education to the world's most underserved students. And I believe she represents the future of human-centered technology." Mabel stepped onto the stage. She didn't walk like a tech executive. She didn't stride in with swagger. She moved like someone who had never been seen before, but who had always known she had something to say. The spotlight hit her. She stood behind the podium, fingers grazing the clicker. The giant LED screen behind her shifted to a clean, quiet slide. Pathway, because knowledge shouldn't require privilege. For a split second, she froze. The sea of suits, faces, blinking devices, all of it threatened to swallow her. But then she looked down at her hands. The same hands that had once cleaned those suits' houses. The same hands that had written 10,000 lines of code on borrowed time. She took a breath, and she began. Her voice was calm, clear, laced with a subtle accent that gave every word a weight of authenticity. "I was not supposed to be here," she said. "Where I'm from, girls don't grow up to build software. We grow up to survive, to clean, to disappear." There was silence in the room. She continued, "But I had a dream, not just for me, but for every child who wants to learn but has no school, no books, no teacher, no internet." She clicked. The slide changed to a simple infographic. No internet. Pathway runs offline. No laptop? It works on $30 phones. No electricity? Solar backup supported. She walked them through her interface, her learning modules, her voice narration tool designed for children with literacy gaps. She showcased how local teachers could record personalized lessons and transmit them via QR code or even Bluetooth, completely sidestepping unstable networks. Education doesn't have to be expensive, she said, eyes steady. It just has to be designed with empathy. By now, people weren't just watching, they were leaning in. She ended not with a sales pitch, but with a story about her brother Daniel, who left school at 9 to support the family. About how he used to draw in the dirt because they had no pencils. About how she had built Pathway so no other child would have to draw dreams in dust. She clicked the final slide. Let's turn broken systems into bridges. Silence. Then a single clap. Then a second. And then a standing ovation. Backstage, Mabel stepped off the platform and immediately found herself surrounded. Val hugging her tight, journalists scribbling, investors nodding thoughtfully. Someone handed her a card. Another asked if she had a business plan. Richard appeared beside her, hands in his pockets, pride dancing quietly in his eyes. That, he said, was a damn fine pitch. She blinked back tears. I wasn't pitching, she whispered. I was just telling the truth. He nodded. Exactly. By the end of the day, 3 impact-focused venture firms had scheduled follow-up meetings. A representative from UNICEF asked about deployment in East Africa. The CEO of a rival edtech company offered to host a hackathon with her team. But none of it felt real. Not yet. It wasn't until Mabel returned home that night, pulled the flash drive from her bag, and opened the original sketch of Pathway, the one drawn in pencil on paper months ago, that it hit her. She had spoken her dream aloud, and the world had listened. The jet hummed quietly beneath the clouds. Mabel sat by the window, staring down at the mosaic of land and life far below. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers curled around the corner of her worn leather notebook. The same one she'd used in secret, the same one that held the first shaky sketch of what would become Pathway. Now she was flying, not as someone being told where to go, but as someone choosing her direction. The irony didn't escape her. The girl who once cleaned private jets was now a guest on one. Across the aisle sat a young associate from the nonprofit wing of Hearts Innovations, typing notes from a development meeting they'd just left in Nairobi. Their next stop, a rural region in the Ghana. A local school had agreed to pilot the Pathway Lite app in classrooms without internet, starting next week. Mabel's thoughts drifted. She was about to return home, not as a daughter of poverty, but as an architect of possibility. The heat hit her as soon as the SUV pulled onto the dirt road leading to her village. Palm trees swayed lazily overhead, and the sun painted long shadows on cracked concrete and old wooden homes. Children played barefoot in the dust, chasing a plastic bottle kicked into a makeshift soccer ball. Their laughter echoed across the open air, unfiltered and wild. Just as she remembered, when the SUV pulled up near her old school, a small, one-story building with chipped blue paint and iron-barred windows, she stepped out slowly. Locals began to gather, some recognizing her instantly, others whispering with cautious curiosity. Mabel? Came a familiar voice. She turned to see Mrs. Gabrielle, her childhood teacher, gray-haired now, but eyes just as sharp. Mabel's throat tightened. Ma'am. The old woman stepped forward and took her hand, then looked her over with disbelief. You left as a girl who barely spoke in class, and you've returned with the world in your hands. Mabel laughed softly, blinking away tears. Not the world, just an app. Inside the classroom, she stood before 20 students seated on old wooden benches. The whiteboard behind her was stained from years of use. The walls were decorated with faded posters, multiplication tables, the alphabet, a torn chart showing basic human anatomy. She held up a cheap Android tablet. This, she said, is your teacher too. The students leaned in. She opened Pathway Lite, demonstrating how to navigate through the lessons. She showed them how to tap icons to hear words spoken in their dialect, how to answer questions by speaking instead of typing, how progress could be tracked even when the tablet was offline. She watched their faces change, first confusion, then awe, then curiosity. One small girl raised her hand. "Is it magic?" Mabel smiled. "No, it's not magic. It's just knowledge. And now you can hold it." A boy in the back whispered, "We can learn like city kids now." "Better," she said, "because you'll learn from a system that knows who you are, not just what you lack." That evening, under the open sky, Mabel sat with her younger brother Daniel. Now 17, taller than she remembered, but still carrying the weight of growing up too fast. He watched her scroll through the pathway dashboard, where their pilot school's first test session had already synced via a portable signal booster. "You really built that?" he asked. Mabel nodded. "I wanted to go back to school," he said quietly. "But I had to work. It wasn't your fault." She looked at him. "That's why I built it." He nodded, staring at the stars. "So no one else has to pick between food and knowledge." They sat in silence for a while. Back in Accra a week later, Mabel stood on stage again. This time not in a tech conference, but in front of hundreds of public educators and officials from the Department of Education. Behind her, footage played of the children from her village using Pathway, laughing as they completed spelling games, pointing at the screen, clapping when they got answers right. "This isn't charity," Mabel told the crowd. "This is infrastructure, as real as water and roads. Education is the software of society, and it's time we updated it." The room erupted in applause. By month's end, 4 regional governments had signed agreements to deploy Pathway in public learning centers. NGOs offered support. Mabel's team began hiring, not just engineers, but local storytellers and translators, people who could shape lessons to reflect the children's world, not someone else's. And just like that, a project born in secret on a borrowed laptop began to pulse through the veins of real classrooms, real futures. One night, Mabel stood outside the old Hart's estate, visiting for the first time since the summit. The house looked the same, regal, untouchable. But the study window was lit. She walked toward it and saw Richard, now older, sitting in the chair where he once caught her. No longer a gatekeeper, but a believer. She tapped on the glass. He turned, smiled, walked to the door. "Coming back for old time's sake?" he asked. Mabel shook her head. "No, I'm coming to ask if we can expand into Latin America." He raised an eyebrow. "What do you need?" She grinned. "Just a bigger runway." The new headquarters of Pathway Global overlooked the city like a lighthouse made of glass and steel. Humble in form, but radiant in purpose. There were no marble statues, no private lounges or golden logos. Instead, murals of children from around the world lined the inner walls. In one corner, a girl from Sierra Leone learning to write her name on a tablet. In another, a boy in a wheelchair in rural India solving math problems on voice-guided lessons. Inside, the building hummed not with silence, but with energy, the quiet tapping of keys, the low murmur of brainstorming sessions, laughter from the cafeteria where coders, curriculum designers, and community translators shared meals like teammates, not co-workers. Mabel stood in her office, glass walls, with desk, no door. Her title read, Chief Technology and Vision Officer. But the placard she kept on the shelf told a fuller story. It read, Code with Empathy. It was carved into a block of salvaged wood from her childhood home, a gift from her brother Daniel, who now managed the Southeast Asia Education Outreach Program. As she reviewed a pitch deck for a South American expansion, a soft knock came at the glass wall. She turned. A young intern stood there, barely 20, nervously holding a tablet and a tangle of USB cables. "Hi, ma'am," she said. I wanted to tell you something. I found an old laptop in the IT closet, a really slow one, and I've been staying after hours to work on a little project. I know it wasn't official, but I just wanted to build something." Mabel paused, heart slowing, recognition blooming like a flame. "What were you building?" she asked gently. The girl stepped forward, offering the tablet. Her hands trembled. It's an app for deaf students. My cousin can't hear, and most of our schools don't teach sign language. So I thought maybe the app could. Mabel took the tablet, eyes scanning the home screen. The interface was rough, but intuitive. A hand gesture tutorial. Visuals matched with local words. A facial recognition module in testing. And in the corner, in tiny font. Built with love, not credentials. A long moment passed. Mabel looked up, her eyes soft. "Do you have a notebook?" she asked. The girl blinked. "A notebook?" Mabel nodded. "A sketchpad. Wireframes. Doodles. Ideas that aren't done yet." The girl pulled a dog-eared, spiral-bound pad from her bag and held it close, as if embarrassed. "I don't know if it's good. I can't stop thinking about it." Mabel smiled. "Good," she said. "Come in." She led the intern to the soft chairs near her desk. The same ones she used when Richard once sat down beside her, all those months ago. She flipped through the notebook, nodding slowly, offering suggestions here and there, never interrupting too much. She listened more than she spoke. "Do you want help building this out?" she finally asked. The girl looked stunned. "You'd help me?" "I would expect to," Mabel said. The girl looked down at her own work, eyes welling. "People like me, we don't get into rooms like this." Mabel reached out and tapped the tablet gently. "You didn't walk into this room," she said. "You built your way in." That night, long after the lights dimmed in the upper floors and the elevators went quiet, Mabel sat alone in the quiet of her office. Not exhausted, not overworked, just at peace. She opened her old notebook, the original one. Faded now, pages loose at the spine. She flipped to the first sketch of Pathway. A boxy UI drawn in pencil, notes in the margins in broken English and Spanish. Beside it was a sticky note she'd saved all this time, yellowed by age. "Even broken wings can learn to fly." She ran her fingers across the page, and suddenly she was back there again. In the dark study, the cold marble beneath her feet, the fear in her chest. But that version of her had not died. She had simply evolved. In the months that followed, Pathway expanded to more than 30 countries. It became not just an app, but a movement, a coalition of builders, educators, and dreamers who believed in designing for the forgotten. Richard Hart stepped down from his CEO role that year, transitioning into a strategic advisor role with Pathway. When asked at a press conference why he was stepping away, he simply said, "The best leaders know when to step aside. I didn't build Pathway. I was just lucky enough to recognize it before the world did." Years later, at a United Nations summit on global education, Mabel stood before leaders and changemakers from every continent. She told them about broken systems, about invisible children, about the power of listening. And before she left the podium, she ended with a single truth. Some of the greatest innovations in history weren't born in boardrooms or tech labs. They were born in quiet rooms, in late nights, by people who weren't supposed to build anything at all. But they built anyway, and now they teach the world. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.